I've spent the courtesy of last weekend playing a fair bit of current support warrior, and that means I have to climb back up again. Because who could have foreseen that the thing I myself repeatedly called underpowered might be underpowered? That said, I feel obligated to give credit where credit is due. I was capable of eventually finding success with a support build in upper gold, but for now I wouldn't bet anything on it. I still have to exclude possibility of these few wins being a statistical outlier. On top of which, it suffices to say, there are problems. It's no one's secret at this point that putting a build into welcoming embrace of ranked PvP unveils the cracks and shortcomings like nothing else, and support warrior, well, see for yourself the astonishing healing prowess warrior is capable of. The irony of this thief being named Pain isn't lost on me, I can assure you. But what was this clip supposed to convey, except the obvious truth that I'm worthy of my place in the universe? Well, it showcases the most on-the-nose issue with using staff as a support tool. Players need healing the most when they are low on health. And when they are low on health, they run for their bloody lives. I know something about it. I was in that exact situation roughly 7,000 times so far. In GW2, when survival is at stakes, you focus on getting away with your life, not on blaming the healer for every choice you made up to this point. It's not Overwatch. Unfortunately, this makes support's job more difficult, as seemingly no one ever remembers supports exist to begin with. And so, people tend to accidentally run away from the healing. Everyone who played support for any extended period of time had a downed thief, mesmer or an elementalist teleport out of the revive spell at least once. And it feels awful, especially when insta revives have over 2 minutes of cooldown across the bloody board. Speaking of revives, can an elite skill with 2 minutes of cooldown at least accomplish the single purpose it is used for, and not be completely invalidated by a common condition? Coming back to previous complaint, warrior's staff, as good as it is on paper, fares worse than stellar when it comes to healing people other than yourself. This is staff's only issue in regards to functioning as a support-oriented weapon. It maybe doesn't deviate far from what standard healing skills cast times are. Ranger's Astral Whip is exactly the same cast time as Valiant Leap, and depending on range, Linebreaker will have cast time equal to Valiant Leap or slightly below full cast of Empower. However, Astral Wisp has 1200 range and also attaches to the target ally, healing them wherever they go, while Empower is a channeled ability delivering healing gradually over time in a 600 unit radius. This leads to a situation where warrior's staff is worse at healing his teammates in realistic PvP scenario than any other heal staff except Revenants due to range constraints and additional requirements to access his most dependable healing. Further than this, we have to consider the travesty with a crankshaft that Linebreaker is in relation to healing teammates. This ability has separate cast time for the dash portion, which can take up to 2 seconds, and healing pulse animation, which takes about half a second, including aftercast. That means if you try to heal somebody far away from you, the chance they leave skill's effective area of healing before you arrive there is uncomfortably high. Your most effective way of healing distant targets is using Linebreaker purely as a gap closer and figuring it out from there, where most viable healers not only have long-range healing in their toolkits so they can support their allies from more advantageous positions, but also have access to faster, more potent means of traversal. Rush and Linebreaker are strong contenders for title of 2 slowest dashes in the entire bloody game. Sure, they both beat walking as a movement option, and Rush has some lovably target tracking, but when it comes to landing a healing AoE with effective 2 seconds of delay on an ally that doesn't have an option to stay both still and alive, you can probably guess where's the issue. But not just a staff makes a healer. Warrior has, after all, access to much more than just one weapon. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean we're out of the woods where the bastard is buried, as shout healing is a pitfall. consider the following. Who is the default priority target in a teamfight and why? It is the support, because he makes everyone around him harder to kill. Only fringe scenarios like Gunzerker Detected call for exemption from this rule. But for the most part, taking the support out, or at least forcing him to burn cooldowns, is always high on the target priority list. Therefore, it is easy to conclude that support is going to need stability to avoid getting chain CC'd, some damage sponge skill to survive through enemies' burst windows, sustain to survive through chained pressure, and finally damage mitigation to make all of the above somewhat manageable. Through this lens, shouts provide as much value as vegan cooking advice. For Great Justice grants us exact same boons as Valiant Leap, except one is 8 seconds of cooldown and gives you adrenaline for ally hits, and other is a 20 seconds of cooldown, needs a trait to heal at all, and takes up a utility slot. On My Mark applies vulnerability and reveals a single target. It is sort of pathetic. Fear Me, as a CC skill with huge area of effect for this type of skill, at least provides something useful, and Shake It Off is indispensable for a support due to AoE cleanse and stun break. To the Limit, on the other hand, competes for the spot with Defiant Stance, making you choose between a big heal and few seconds of complete safety. You can probably guess which is more potent when you're in direct line of sight from 3 or more enemy players for majority of the match. So in total, shouts give no damage mitigation, no stability, 1 stun break, no defensive boons, and healing that is outpaced by staff alone in about 10 seconds, that cost 4 utility slots to be comparable. Utility slots that could be spent on better skills. Banner of Defense grant twice the shout heal in barrier and then 3 times as much in regen. Balanced Stance basically makes you CC immune for the duration, not to mention reducing the crit damage. Defiant Stance makes you literally immortal for the duration. Only shout worth taking is Shake It Off, and that's because we don't have any cleanse built into stuff itself. Shout healing is just a crutch that turns Bladesworn into a ticking tank bomb that devs have to pussyfoot around not to obliterate PvP from the orbit. Just plain deleting it alongside Unshakable Mountain would be healthier for the game than keeping Bladesworn backwards fact just because Shoutsworn once existed. Just take the ammo off of remaining shouts in versus modes like you did with Shake It Off, and we can balance it from there instead of seeking balance point that makes everyone unhappy. Anyhow, we touched already about everything except bloody traits, and here's where the bastard is buried. Consider this. To equip tactics in the first place, you need to forgo defense, discipline, or elite spec. Therefore, at least for now, if we play support in PvP, we play Core Warrior. Welcome to PvP, the land of defense discipline. Further than this, if we want to pick Stalwart Focus, we'd have to forgo Warrior's Sprint, which we'll never do. If we want doubled standards, we'd have to forgo Brawler's Recovery, which isn't worth it. There's nothing supportive in Grandmaster Column worth taking over Burst Mastery. We want Shieldmaster and Merciless Hammer from defense for adrenaline generation, and Last Stand for that sweet stance survivability. Which means our support build is exactly 1 trait different from every other defense discipline setup. Please kill me. And tactics, entire middle row plays the role of our elite spec, so to speak. Here we also have no viable choices, because Leg Specialist needs 2 different trait lines to be viable, and none of them are viable, while Roaring Reveille is only needed to upkeep boons in PvE modes. Warrior Scanning is some kind of unfunny joke, Empower Allies just grants Might, which isn't comparable to other Pulse of Cleanse and Healing, which also makes every condition removed into a small heal, on top of which there isn't a single trait in Grandmaster Column of Tactics that isn't utter garbage. Martial Cadence was purposefully made redundant in all 3 game modes because the original Martial Cadence that made the most sense apparently shut into someone's lunch, and therefore we put the most potent boon in every mode on something that makes it virtually impossible to play around just to spite warrior mains. Further than this, Phylax's strength is exactly what a class that can upkeep 25 stacks of might without it needs. More AoE might. And therefore we have no other option than to run Vigorous Shouts, because it at least increases our healing across the board, and we can logically slot one shout into our build. In summary, we can say that there exists a healer/support warrior build that functions in PvP. Unfortunately, it is 2/3 the same as every other warrior build that functions in PvP. Of course, we can play a suboptimal build for the sake of our own enjoyment, but that's a separate argument, and competitive integrity is an argument on its own. Heal Warrior still needs time in the oven. It is playable and viable on technicality level, but it is still miles behind genuine dedicated support builds. Tempest's magnetic aura alone can swing fights around when enemy team has 2 or more projectile specs, and the fact that Bloody Bastard can upkeep it for 12 seconds with little effort on entire team shows the glimpse of Tempest's true potential. It is going to be quite a bumpy ride before Warrior achieves level of viability close or on par with current meta for supports. But what we already got certainly suffices for now. Crabface out.